You guys hear me okay? Thank you. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to get a YouTube stream running. All right. Can you see my screen? No. Let me just fix that. If somebody wouldn't mind just checking the YouTube is streaming for me, I just posted it into live QA and that the voice is working. I'd appreciate it. Cool. All right. I managed to get OBS working. That's great. People joining, leaving the room is going to be annoying, but we'll see how that goes. Right, Stephen, did you had some questions? What did you want me to show you?
Who, me?
You?
I don't think so.
No? You wanted to keep record of print times?
No, that wasn't me.
You? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, Stefan, rather. I see and hear the guy in the red shirt. That's me, Do Rednew. Thank you. Okay. What I wanted to do is just quickly run through Octoprint, and I'll answer questions from the live QA channel. This is a fairly clean Octoprint install I just put onto an Ender 5, and then I'll flip to a printer that's got Clipper installed just to show the Clipper pieces. So Moshe, one of your biggest concerns about Octoprint is the interface. Is it possible to get rid of tabs and get all the info on one screen? So not completely, unfortunately, but I'll show you a few things I do to help fix up the interface. So I guess the first thing is maybe just walk around the interface. So there's a wizard that runs when you first set it up, which is pretty self-explanatory. You set up a login normally. You can turn on usage statistics if you want to. That sends data back to Octoprint. If we look at the Octoprint page, you just download it from octoprint.org. It's a Raspberry Pi image. You want a B plus, a 3B plus, or a Pi 4 these days. That go to the Raspberry Pi on how to burn the image to an SD card. I use a product called Etcher on Mac, but there's lots of different ways to burn the image. You need to set up your Wi-Fi. So if you SSH onto the Pi, let me just on the boot partition, you can get to this file just by putting the SD card onto your computer. And don't worry, this is not my real Wi-Fi, so you're not seeing anything. But you set the SSID and password of the of your Wi-Fi. You need to make sure you uncomment. This is commented by default, so you need to uncomment. This is the section that's important: network, SSID, and the private shared key, which is your Wi-Fi password. Stream quality is not good. Okay. How is it inside Discord? Is that on YouTube, Andre?
You cannot hear me, right? That's good. Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of blurry. We cannot read any most of the thing you're just typing.
On
We
Discord?
can kind of read it, but it's really blurry.
On Discord or on YouTube? Or
And
both?
both.
Huh. Okay. How about if I bump the font up a bit? Is that better?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not going to do much in the terminal. How's the view of the Octoprint? Can you see this okay?
I mean, it's decent. It's really blurry, but it's decent. We can see what you're doing.
All right. Okay. We'll keep going. Maybe I just want to try Discord as a different platform, but maybe this isn't the way to go moving forward. Let me just check I'm on the right Wi-Fi here. Yeah. So once you get it on the Wi-Fi, if you're having troubles getting it on the Wi-Fi, the easiest thing to do is plug your Pi in with a screen and keyboard, or plug it in with an Ethernet cable and try and connect to it that way. If you can't figure out the IP address your Pi is on, if you plug a screen in, it'll show you on the screen the IP address that it's loaded up on. Or another way is to go to your router. Most routers will show you on the DHCP what address it's allocated to the latest machine that connected. So if you plug in the Ethernet, the very latest entry on your DHCP server should be the address of the Pi that just connected. Yeah, worst case scenario, plug it into a screen and keyboard and just check the Wi-Fi is working. If you need help with that, just ask in Discord. We can help out with that. Once you've got in, you go through the wizard, you set up your account, and you'll end up on a screen like this. So across the top, we have settings. There's a power button that lets you shut down the Pi, reboot the Pi, restart just Octoprint, restart Octoprint in safe mode, which is basically it disables all the plugins. So if you install a plugin and then Octoprint won't come back for some reason, you can start it in safe mode to, or something glitches, you can restart in safe mode to disable the plugin. Notifications will appear here, so things like announcements and updates, and you can log in, log out. I've never ever had to touch that in my life. I just log in as myself, and that's me. So let's go through the settings. So, like I said, I'm plugging this into an Ender 5, which is running Marlin, and I'll show you a Clipper printer in a moment. So it's slightly different for Clipper. Um, so normally Auto's fine; it'll find your printer. In fact, I can show you Clipper now. So on a printer with Clipper, you're going to point to temp printer, which is a file on the Pi that Clipper runs on, and then baud rate. And in order for that serial port to appear, you need to add it as an additional serial port. Okay, so it's showing me here. Here are the two MCUs on this Voron 2. You don't want to talk directly to the Arduinos. You want to be talking to Clipper, so you're going to go to temp Clipper. You want exclusive access to the serial port. You don't want things interfering. You do not want to turn on logging unless you need to for troubleshooting. If you turn on logging, that can severely slow down the communication between Octoprint and Clipper. It causes issues with the host sometimes. So you shouldn't be turning on that logging unless you need to. Timeouts is up to you, how frequently you want it to poll the temperature and so on. Sorry, I need to flip back to this printer so I'm not messing up my live printer. You don't need to keep polling the SD card. We don't use SD printing with Clipper. We have communication timeouts. You may want to increase the communication timeout if you have commands that take a long time to run. But typically the defaults are all fine. You don't need to worry about that too much. Block commands can be used. Can be useful if you've got commands that take a long time to run. I want to say bed mesh calibrate, for example. Sorry, not blocked. These are commands you never want to run. Sorry. Long-running commands is the one I'm talking about here. Long-running commands like bed mesh calibrate stops Octoprint worrying that it's taking a long time for the printer to respond to a particular macro that you're running. So long-running commands is useful. So it's already got things like home, and if you use G32 to mesh, then you don't have to worry about that. But you can add additional long-running commands here if you want to. And then in behavior, what to do with a firmware error. So you can see by default, it will disconnect from the printer on an error. You don't want to do that with Clipper. So hopefully, if I look at behavior here, you see I have it set to ignore because sometimes Clipper sends back errors that aren't really fatal errors. So you can set that to ignore, and rather than killing your connection to the printer. Okay. Printer profiles. So here you set up what sort of printer it is, the build volume. It's not critical for you to set this up, but it is useful. If you have multiple printers, I've done this before. You slice something for a 300 bed and then send it to a printer with a 250 bed, and Octoprint will memorily try to print it if you haven't set this properly. Whereas if I try and send a plate that's 300 width to this printer now, Octoprint will complain and say what you're trying to print is too big for the printer. So that's useful if you mess up. But other than that, I don't think it offers much. It's useful for um, delete objects, and I think it influences the G code viewer as well, the sizing that you put in here. Axis speed, you can play around with these. Again, I don't think it really matters to go from defaults. This is just the speed if you use the controls inside Octoprint. And then nozzle diameter and number of extruders. This is important for the temperature tab and but again, typically we only have one extruder on a Voron printer currently. Okay, under temperatures, you can set your default temperatures to see for your quick temperature sets, which I'll show you in a moment. And you can tell it to send fine adjustments immediately or wait until you click the OK button. And then the graph cutoff is how long over a temperature, how much history to show on the graph. So again, the default's fine. If you want to show more history, you can do. You can set that to 60 minutes or what have you. Terminal filters I've never touched. G-code scripts are important. So typically, I just let my slicer take care of what's going on with the scripts. But if you do use the cancel button, you probably don't want to disable your motors when you hit cancel, because then you have to rehome and requad. So I typically turn that off. It's up to you if you want to disable your heaters and disable your fans. So cancelled is one that's worth checking into. Normally, I would just do something like go to X0, Y0, and just get the print head out of the way if I have to cancel a job. So if it's been printing in the middle, if I have to hit cancel an Octoprint, I just get it to move the head out of the way. And then pause and resume. I'm not going to get into here, but there's commands you need to put in if you're using filament runout sensors and if you're using the pause and resume functionality. Everything else typically blank. All right, I'll stop there. Any questions so far? You can just type in the chat. To find the chat. Okay. Desktop stream should be updating. I'm on Octoprint settings screen. Is it just being super slow? All right, I'll keep an eye on that. Sorry about that. Features, these are all pretty self-explanatory. Webcam is pretty self-explanatory. It should auto-detect any fairly recent webcam you plug in. You can test it here. Access control, just your user. G-code visualizer, I tend not to use it, but you can do. You get a warning if you try to open up a big file. API I'm not going to get into here, but you can use the API with other. So some slicers allow you to print direct to Octoprint. So the main thing I want to get into is the plugin manager. Oh, it's not connected to the internet. All right, so let's flip over here to look at plugins. So what I was going to do is just kind of run through some of the plugins that I use, and then maybe if people want to share in the chat any plugins that they're interested in. That's a good shout. I'll turn the video off. Is this better now? Is it keeping up with me moving around? Okay, thanks, Andrew. Turning the video off was a good shout. All right, plugins. So you get a bunch of default plugins, and I'm just going to go through a few that I use quite extensively. So Auto Select plugin. What that does is, as you upload a file for printing, so if I upload something here, Wreck-It Ralph, rather than me then having to click print down in the files box, it'll automatically make it pick it for printing um, in the state here. Delete after print plugin. What this one does is once the print is finished, if it finishes successfully, you can set it to automatically delete the file, or if you want, you can have it move it into archive, which is what I do. So the auto select, you see that just finished uploading that G code, and now it's automatically been picked for printing, and I can just click print. So that's just a convenience thing, is the auto select. And then the delete after print is if I'd finished printing this, the way I have it set is it then moves it into this archive folder. So if I go into archive, you can see all the stuff that I've ever printed. This is a really useful plugin. It helps with performance. If you have lots of things in the file list here, it can really slow down loading up this screen. So I find that delete after print plugin really useful. So the settings for that are just here. And rather than deleting files, I have it set to move to archive, and I just move them after a day. You can set it to 5 days. You can set it to delete after 5 days, however you want to do it. But the way I have it is to move into archive after 1 day. Okay. Needs donate setup. Thank you. I'm not really there yet. Fan speed control is another useful plugin. So when you first install Octoprint, which I should be able to show you here, because I haven't set this one up yet, you only get the option to turn fans on or off, which is not really great. So fan speed control lets you set the speed to a particular speed rather than just on or off. What you can also do is lock the speed. So now whatever I do here is being ignored. So if you want to lock it, so you're not accidentally clicking something, you can do so here. So fan speed control is another useful one. InfluxDB, I'll come back to towards the end of the stream. That allows you to do live graphing of events going on the printer. Nautilus, I don't really use anymore. I used to use it quite extensively. It's a mobile app for iPhone. It lets you control Octoprint using your phone, but I've kind of stopped doing that. I just use I've got an old laptop near my printers now, which I'm using to control things. But if you use your phone, rather than using Octoprint in the web browser on your phone, I would use one of these apps. So there's Nautilus. I think there's another good one for Android, but the name escapes me right now. Clipper is important for Clipper. We'll come to that one in a moment. The Pi support plugin is built in to Octoprint now. So that just tells you if your Pi is overheating or is throttled. It'll warn you. So you can take action around that. So screen squish is another interesting one. So one of you asked about the width of tabs and things. So if I turn this off real quick. Actually, no, I won't. I'll leave it on. I lied. I can show you the default. So by default, you get all this white space to the left and right of the view, and if you shrink the screen, it's not mobile enabled, right? It's not reactive. So what Screen Squish does is you still get a bit of margin either side, unfortunately, but it does turn the view to be more reactive. So what that means is if I shrink this right down, you see it goes to a single column, which is useful on mobile. And if you expand out, you do get a bit more width than you would normally on your screen. So that is the Screen Squish plugin. CJ Kerr, you realize that @ here notifies literally everybody. Yes, I am aware of that. Are you aware that if you mute a server, you don't get pinged? Okay. So if you get into if you're worried about screen state, Screen Squish is the way to go. One is terminal commands. This is the plugin I use for managing macros in Octoprint. So that is useful because we do run a lot of the clipper commands. So let me show you that real quick. So on the terminal screen, you see I got these buttons down the bottom here. So I've not fully set it up on this one, but basically you can do home, whatever macros you want to run, they just become buttons here. And then what these ones do is that they allow me to adjust my corners. So I can move just the front left corner up or down in the four corners of the quad. So if I go into settings for terminal commands and add a button, so you could do, for example, firmware restart. And you can give that a button that you like, an icon that you like. I don't know, star. And I want to put that up here. And another useful one is status. The nice thing with this terminal command editor is you can also tell it whether it's enabled during printing or not. So, for example, quad, you do not want enabled while you're printing. So if you accidentally hit quad, it will go in quad level during a print. So if there's commands that you want to run while you are printing, so adjusting the corners potentially, I would want to run while I'm printing. So that's where you tick the enabled while printing button. And then confirm just gives a little prompt on the screen, are you sure? Right? You can turn that on and off. But basically, any command that you can type in to the terminal, you can create a button for with extended commands, terminal commands. Okay. Virtual commands built in, and then webcam tab. Okay, all webcam tab does is it moves. Normally the webcam's on the control screen, which I find really annoying. So what webcam tab does is it just moves webcam onto its own tab, so it's out of the way. I don't use a webcam, so which is why I turned that off. How would you set up baby stepping? Yeah, so that's what I'm using those buttons for there. So there's a couple of ways you can do baby stepping. I'm baby stepping each individual corner here. So this is stepper Z is front left, stepper 3 is front right, up or down by a certain amount. You can set how far you want it to be, or you can set up a macro that does all 4 at once and moves them up and down by a certain amount and call that command whatever you want to call it. But yes, that's effectively baby stepping that I'm doing there. Does that answer your question? Cool, thank you. It's better to do a macro actually, because if you want to, you can put that baby stepping onto your display on your printer. If you're running a display with Clipper, you can add it. You can add the macro to your display, or you can use the same force commands. It's up to you how you want to set that up. Okay, and then Octoclipper. I don't use macros in Octoclipper here. You get eStop by default, right? You can add macros like home, right? You could add G28. And those macros appear in the top left-hand corner here. So it's keep eStop around because that's useful. But I don't bother adding loads of other macros on the left here. I prefer to use it here because you see the output immediately in the terminal. Lead leveling, I don't use the assistant here at all. We've got quad. And then you can edit the configuration here. I'm not a fan of editing the configuration in Octoprint. It works at a pinch, but it's we have had issues sometimes where people have edited it here and it's deleted the whole config, or it didn't back it up properly. We have had some problems with it. So personally, I use Visual Studio, which I showed in another stream. But you can edit the if there's something quickly you need to change, you can do it here. But make sure you got backups of your configs if you're using this all the time. And then if you're looking at the actual Clipper tab here, you can restart the service. You can restart the firmware here. You can kick off your PID tuning. The macros that you define that appear on the left here also appear here. The most important thing, well, the thing I use this the most for troubleshooting is performance graph. So what this does is if you have done several prints, or if you have a problem with prints, maybe the print head's pausing at places you don't expect it to. So you can look at old logs. So this is a pretty normal, this is a Pi 3B plus, I want to say. And you can see this was what, a 4-hour print. Fairly average MCU load, around 40%. Bandwidth and host buffer are all fine. Okay, so this is an okay view of a print in the performance graph. If I look at, I copied one over which was bad. Let me try and find it. So this is a glitchy one. And what you can see here is the host buffer's filling up, so it's hitting 100%. So when that happens, if it's happening during a print, you could actually see the print head pause and you'll get blobbing on your print. So if you do see strange print artifacts or if you see your print head pausing, the first thing to come look at is this performance graph. And just check the host buffer isn't hitting 100% or the MCU load isn't going too high. And then come into Discord if that's the case, and we can try and help you troubleshoot it. There are some things you can do to increase the host buffer, or it could be a communication problem, or some other clipper issue. But this performance graph is really useful for troubleshooting. And then I guess the final plugin I use quite a bit, except I broke it recently. I didn't realize I renumbered my network recently, and then I was looking at Influx to show you guys, and then I realized it's not working. But basically, what InfluxDB is, it's a time series database that this plugin sends information about your printer to Influx, and then you can use an application called Grafana to view what's going on with your printer. If people are interested in this, I might do a separate session. But basically, everything that's going on your printer is sent to Influx, and then I think I have one here I was playing with. I create a dashboard. Black underscore. Okay, let's see if this is working. So I'm interested in Octoprint information, and I am interested in black temperature. My printer's called Black, that's why I call it Black. And let's look at bed actual temp, and I want the actual value of the bed. Okay, so you can see that's graphing the bed over time. So this is actually just showing fluctuations in ambient right now. So what I can also plot on here is then we look at black temperature. Let's look at the hot end actual temperature. Okay, so they should be a little closer. Maybe one of my thermistors isn't quite right. And yeah, that's the current temperature of this printer in theory. So if I turn the hot end on, we should see this update over time. So I've just turned the hot end on, and you can see it starting to creep up here. And this is all in real time, in theory. Well, maybe a couple of seconds behind. And the other kind of things you can do here are you can do things like print progress. So I could do Octoprint. I've not done any prints on that one with Influx, but if I do percentage complete and show this as a progress gauge, for example, it's just finished the print, so it's 100%. But you can have this map out print progress over time. And this is useful if you've got multiple printers, right? So you're seeing I've got all my printers are available here, right? So you could add the print progress for multiple printers and have them all on one dashboard is the idea here. And these dashboards you can move things around and set them up how you want. So if you wanted, you could have the temperature graph of several printers all on one screen. So if people are interested in Influx and Grafana and playing around with this, I'd be happy to do a separate session on it. And let's turn that off because it's probably going to melt something. I'm not printing. Okay. All right, let's have a look. Any questions from anybody in the chat? Don't be shy. Stefan asked about total print times and stats to ensure maintenance on regular intervals. Any suggestions for plugins? So yeah, there's a plugin called Print Job History I found. I've never used it. So but I installed it earlier, but it looks like it'll do what you want. You can export to CSV. So you end up with this list of all the prints that you did. If you've got Prusa Slicer preview set up, it'll tag an image of the preview, or it can take a webcam snapshot. So as the print completes, it takes the webcam snapshot and adds that as an image to print time history. And then apparently you can export a CSV file with all the data in. So I've never used that plugin, Stefan, but I think that's probably your best bet. Oh, you're running it at the moment. Okay, then sorry, no, I don't know anything other than that. I mean, I've got a lot of data in Influx, but I don't track things like file names and what have you. General thoughts on using Octoprint for controlling LEDs, filament runout, and so on. Yeah, absolutely. You can do that. I would try and run it through using terminal commands. You can set up buttons to turn things on and off. And if you're running off the Pi GPIO, you can pretty much run any command you like from Octoprint, or from Clipper for that matter. There's a few plugins that allow you to, I think the main one's called System Commands. Let's find that. G-code System Commands. So what G-code System Commands does is allows you to send G-code, so you can have it in your slicer code. So it could be in your Mac, it could be in your startup script to turn a light green, for example, and your ending script in your slicer could turn a light red. And G-code System Commands will pick up that command and do the appropriate on the printer. So Raymond, I ran through all the bed visualizer. Yeah. Setting up Octoprint access outside of the LAN is not something I'd recommend doing. And it is a bit out of scope. But Stefan, you can ping me on the Clipper channel if you want to get into that a bit more. It's not something I really want to cover here. There's a lot of security issues with doing that. What are Octoprint alternatives? Why use Octoprint over them? So there's Mainsail that's being developed here. There's Replica Host. I'd have to have other people chime in. I've not really looked at alternatives recently that provide a similar kind of web-based interface to control your printer. You can obviously plug your slicers directly to the printer. It's an option. You can do that. But yeah, I mean, Octoprint's really the de facto at the moment. There's not been a good alternative that I've seen so far. So sorry, this is G-code system command. So you basically you can create your own. You create the G-code, so Octo4, and that can run any command. You can literally run anything. You could sudo shutdown now, and if you put that G-code Octo4 in your end slicer script, it will shut the printer down. Thoughts on mainsail versus Octo Clipper? I mean, I think mainsail's looking awesome. I've not actually installed it yet, so once it's a bit more release ready, we'll do a specific mainsail live. But it's looking great. I think the main thing for me is that it's printing from it's printing from effectively virtual SD than which is fine. And it's got a much lower footprint. So in theory, you could run mainsail on a lower spec Raspberry Pi. So I can't really draw comparisons because I've not used it extensively. But yeah, keep an eye on mainsail. It's looking great so far. Been here for 10 minutes. Octoprint hasn't been mentioned once. Okay. Okay, lots of drama I missed. All right. Octopod on iOS. Thank you, Agent Munro. I've not heard of that one, so that's worth a look. We covered off the baby stepping, I think. How do you do filament change mid-print and resume command? It's you literally hit pause, assuming you've got your pause and resume macros set up correctly, but you hit pause, move the head out the way, change the filament, doing whatever you need to do. Once you're done, hit resume. There's not much to it if you're using Octoprint to do the pause and resume. You have a filament runout sensor. It's slightly different, I think. But I think effectively all the filament runout does is run a pause. The trick to it, Will, is setting up your pause and resume macros in Clipper properly. Ellis, yes, I agree. Use a VPN. Exactly. Don't set it up remotely by port forwarding or what have you. All right. Any other questions on Octoprint? I see you're not really monitoring the status of the enclosure, like temp and humidity. Not interested. So I do measure the chamber temp. That's the yellow one here. So all I've done there is set it up as a separate thermistor in Clipper. And then I think I had to tell Octoprint I have 2 extruders, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I told Octoprint I've got 2 extruders. And then it plots the second line. You can't see it because it's the same. If I let me just turn the temp of the bed on here real quick. Actually, not on that printer. Do it here. Why do I use another tool for chamber? That's just something really hacky that I do. It's because I can send a set temp and wait command. So what I can do is turn my bed on, and then I can send a set temp and wait to say 30, and then nothing else will run until ambient hits 30. Is why I use a second tool, Raymond. But that's the very specific hack that I do. Probably not the best way of doing things. And no, I don't bother I've never measured humidity inside my chamber. I've never needed to do that. Would be very welcome to hear if anyone's got any comments and if there's a good reason to do that, but I've never needed to. All right. If there's no other questions, I'll stop there for now.